Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Troy Clayton, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Navy is Lieutenant Commander Jed Goggin. This evening, we warmly welcome Group Captain Ernie Walsh, President of the Air Force Association, ACT Division. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. The live stream of this ceremony is made possible by the Return and Services League of Australia and the RSL and Services Club Association. We welcome members who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by visitors to the memorial. If you're able, please stand and join in singing the National Anthem. Thank you. If you're able, you may be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn their loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 103,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Flight Lieutenant Norman Percival Cooper. Norman Cooper was born on the 23rd of September 1912 in the Perth suburb of Midland Junction, the son of Samuel and Stella Cooper. When he was 7 years old, his father got into difficulty while swimming at Scarborough Beach and drowned. 3 months later, Stella Cooper gave birth to another son, making a family of 2 brothers and 2 sisters. Norman played the trumpet and trombone and enjoyed riding motorcycles, swimming and photography. After leaving school, he worked as a typist, storeman and dispatch clerk, remaining with the same firm for 11 years. His mother taught music in Perth to support the family, and he served as a bandsman with the 16th Battalion. Norman Cooper enlisted in the Royal Australian Air Force on the 12th of February 1941. He trained as a pilot, receiving his wings in June 1942 and commissioned as a pilot officer with the RAAF in September. On the 23rd of August 1941, Cooper married Bernice Stewart. The couple had a little more than a year together before Cooper embarked for overseas service on the 12th of November 1942, arriving in the UK in December. As part of the Empire Air Training Scheme, he was one of almost 27,500 RAAF pilots, navigators, wireless operators, air gunners and flight engineers who, throughout the course of the war, joined the Royal Air Force squadrons or Australian squadrons based in Britain. After further specialist training, in March 1943, Cooper was promoted to flying officer. In September, he was posted to number 106 Squadron, RAAF, for which he flew 8 sorties on the 4-engined Avro Lancaster heavy bomber. 2 months later, he was transferred to number 463 Squadron as a flight lieutenant. On the night of the 28th of January, Bomber Command launched a major bombing raid on Berlin. Flight Lieutenant Cooper was the pilot of Lancaster Juliet Oscar Sierra, which took off from the Royal Air Force Base at Waddington shortly after midnight. In an attempt at a diversion, the target was initially bombed by a few Mosquito aircraft before the major force arrived. However, this alerted the enemy, and German fighters met the incoming aircraft over Denmark. Cooper's aircraft was still on its way to Berlin when it was likely damaged in the melee. He had turned, trying to head back to England, when his aircraft collided with an oncoming Lancaster from number 83 Squadron, RAF. Both crashed near the village of Mills on the island of Als off the east coast of Denmark, more than 500 kilometres away from their target. There were no survivors. Those killed in the crash with Flight Lieutenant Norman Cooper were Australians Pilot Officer George Kerr and Flight Sergeant Lewis Christmas, along with British Sergeants Francis Bull, Ronald Grist and Frederick Robson, and Canadian Flight Sergeant Harold Suthers. They were all buried at Aberra Cemetery on the Danish mainland. After the war, the remains of Commonwealth servicemen buried in Europe were examined and identified where possible. The remains of Cooper and his crew were exhumed, identified and reinterred at Aberra Cemetery. Flight Lieutenant Norman Cooper was 31 years old. Cooper was dearly missed by his family and friends at home, who placed in memoriam notices in the newspaper for years after his death. He had also left behind a daughter, Kay, born in December 1942, whom he had never met. Flight Lieutenant Norman Cooper's name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my left, amongst almost 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. His photograph is displayed today by the Pool of Reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Flight Lieutenant Norman Percival Cooper, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
We'll remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub of Gallipoli with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the Director, staff and volunteers, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support during the Memorial's development project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening. Thank you.